All right, guys, welcome back to the show. Today, we're going back to Cali. Yeah, we're going back to Cali, and we're going to talk to the fine folks over at Corbin Cash, and we are going to talk about everything that they're doing. I have David here, and he's going to tell us the ins and outs of what it's like to be a farm to table, farm to glass, whatever you want to call it, distillery producing absolutely fantastic whiskeys and other spirits. We're going to get into all of it. So y'all stay tuned. This is going to be a great show. And without further ado, here's David. How's it going?
Good, Randall. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I hate that hard intro where you have to, like, not that we haven't been talking for 5-10 minutes before we press record. You know, it's like you got to do the hard intro. So I wanted to let everybody know that there's going to be a full review of a couple of the products that Corbin Cash has to offer. But tonight I am going to get into, and I don't know what David's going to sip on, but I'm going to get into the 9-year-old 140 proof take pick that he did over with you guys. And this is the Merced, I can't say it right, Merced Rye whiskey. Tell us a little bit about this bottle while I open it up, and then we'll get into the backstory and stuff like that.
Yeah, so it's Merced Rye, and that is kind of an actual, that's the varietal grain that we grow. That bottle from Take, the pick by Jay, it's 140 proof, which is kind of at 9 years is where we start to see our rise kind of go into that hazmat realm. But you know, I feel like these 100% ryes that, and this bottle in particular, really they have a lot going on in them for ryes. You know, you feel the warmth on them, but they don't get, our hazmats are kind of well known for not getting all that burn like you typically would when you start getting into the hazmats. They really kind of, you can chew on them. There's a lot going on in your mouth, and a lot of that contributes back to, you know, the way we farm and the little bit of difference within our grain that we grow.
Awesome. Yeah, I will tell you just off the nose, and I will let the listeners and viewers know that I've dipped into this a little bit. Now, I sampled most of this out. Nobody should drink this much hazmat whiskey at one time. I have sampled quite a bit of this out because I was like, dude, this is cool. And, you know, and there's like a hazmat craze going on right now. To me, I'm hit or miss with it. Like, there's some hazmats, like including this one, that are spot on. I think they're perfect at that. But there's others that I'm like, man, it's just too hot. I just can't do it. Some get too hot, you know, to where you can't drink them. But there's something to be said about a, you know, a higher proof whiskey, to where you can add a little water to it if you want to and stuff like that. And a lot of whiskey people don't do that a whole lot, but with something like a hazmat, I think you should.
Yeah. And I think that the thing I tell you, like, if you can't drink it, what's the point? Right. I mean, whiskey's made to drink. And if the only thing going on is it's too high a proof because, you know, but if it's over oaked or over astringent because it's just too high proof, then, you know, that's not what we're shooting for. And honestly, the hazmats were kind of accidental. We just started discovering them as we got into the 9 and 10-year-old and 11-year-old stuff. But I think, because of our heat here, very similar to Texas where you're at, you know, we don't have the humidity, but we definitely have the heat. And so we see evaporation happen really quickly. And so making sure that I figured out, 6 years into this thing, that if we don't use quality barrels and really precise temperatures and air, not so much temperatures, but airflow through our rick houses, and not aging too high because of the temperature change difference, we would over oak or make astringent whiskey. And so I figured that out at 6 years in. With our first 6-year-old, I was like, man, this is kind of a little bit bitey. Let me take the barrel apart. And so that's when I discovered that our whiskey was surpassing the char in the barrel, getting back into the raw wood and pulling those tannins back in. And so that's when I had to look ahead and be like, look, if we want to make older whiskey, we got to do something different. And so our whole, the way we did things started to, evolve, and using, better barrels, better grade of wood, and then also just in our rick house, creating a lot of airflow. So in space, if we aged whiskey here like Jack Daniels and Jim Beam with 27 barrels high and million gallon, we wouldn't have any whiskey in our barrels. It just would be, and they'd be very astringent.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so take us back to the beginning. One of the questions I'd like to ask everybody is not only why whiskey, but what got you in the path of whiskey?
So more so what I would say what started me probably in the path of distilling would be because the first thing we made was obviously vodka. And what happened, so, we've been farming in Central California for, over 108, 9 years now. And always farming sweet potatoes, rye have been our staple for all this time, but also almonds and watermelons and cattle. We've had a threshold of things, but me being a fourth generation farmer, I really kind of wanted to put my stamp on the family business and diversify in another direction. But mostly because we had all of these sweet potatoes and this rye that we were basically not doing anything with. So the rye that we farm for 90 years, it was just a cover crop. We never sold it. We didn't do anything with it. It was just, we grew it because it's great for our soil. And then we harvested it to plant it the next year. And then the sweet potatoes, which is our money-making commodity that we survive on. There was some few bad years there where we were selling bins of sweet potatoes for 1,000 pounds for $5. And I'm like, dude, there's got to be something better to do with this. And so that's where the whole idea of distilling, and it was a combination of this happening and then me being educated on drinking good booze. So, growing up here in the valley where we grew up, we never really had access to really good stuff. Like, it was like, and this is not a knock to the big guys because Jack Daniels makes some great stuff, but number 7 is just not the best whiskey. Jim Beam White Label, some of the Wild Turkey stuff back in the day, like, we drank SoCo and Coke. Like, so I didn't have personal access to good whiskey or good spirits or hell, even good beer at that time. So I never knew what good drinking was until I got older. And then some gentlemen that I used to, do business with taught me how to like drink good booze. And then I'm like, wow, maybe I can do something unique. And it really, because I never had any interest in it because I never really drank good booze. And then I actually became a connoisseur once I started distilling and I started in the business and then had access to all, as we do these events and taste different, whiskeys and vodkas and gins that were just amazing. And I'm like, oh man, it just set me on a path. And so, really wanting to do things from scratch, and obviously nobody in the country was making sweet potato vodka. I called around, nobody. I was just like, I'll just pay somebody to do it just like everybody else is. And everybody laughed and they're like, yeah, you're crazy. Nobody does that. And there's a reason, because it doesn't produce, it's expensive and it doesn't produce very much.
Right.
So I bought a book off the internet and I, made my own still and went to work in my garage. And so, yeah, basically self-taught. It took about 1.5 years to get that figured out, and then another 1.5 years to build our distillery.
Wow. So about how long have y'all been open as of right now?
So we 2009 was when we were licensed. And then we basically got into the market late I think it was late 09, 2010 was when we launched the vodka. The whiskey, obviously we started laying the whiskey down, and we didn't release anything till it was 4 years old. So we didn't end up into the whiskey on the market until 2014.
Wow. Okay. Okay. But so y'all been in the game for a little bit. Like you've done all the woes, right? You've had all the battles and all of the things, and now you're like consistently laying down good barrels or making good vodka or whatever. Like you got over the learning curve of it. Being 15, almost 16 years in, you would think that that with all that obviously comes expansion and comes all of these other things to where it's good growth, but it's also a little taxing on not only the pocketbook, but also the family dynamic. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. And honestly, man, like, we've been doing this 15, like you said, 15, 16 years, but that's so young in the whiskey world, right? It's really it's just, we're still babies. But I think what it's allowed us to do, and taking it slow and trying to do things the right way, it's allowed me to prove our concept. And so this year we actually released our first 12-year-old double oak.
Wow.
And now I know that, which I'll be sending you a sample of that I didn't get out to you, but
I wasn't even going to bring that up. We had a little miscommunication. Well, not a miscommunication. The secretary went on vacation. Who lets a secretary go on vacation? But still,
that was my fault. It was my fault. But yeah, we'll get you those samples. But yeah, so we released our first 12-year, at the end of December last year, and and now I feel confident we can make some good whiskey. And we've got, a generational thing that we can continue to do. And again, it's a lot of it. The hard part now is just, it's managing the growth, managing the finances behind it, because whiskey world's expensive to play in.
Yeah.
And then, but and the alcohol world's been in a real woe the last couple of years, and especially with distribution. And so, which is probably part of the most challenging part of it is managing distribution and all of that. And so we gained a new distribution partner in California this year that's been pretty proactive with us and good. And so, we're still learning each other and how we get going. But I think now that we have established product, our trajectory can go, because for a long time, I didn't know. I mean, I knew we could make it, but can you sell it, right? It's like making it, I like to tell everybody, making it's the easy part. Making it good's not always easy, but making whiskey's not that hard, but making it good and then selling it's the other thing. But yeah.
And I can tell you, with maybe not firsthand knowledge, but secondhand knowledge. One of my buddies is doing a barrel pick with another distillery, and he's in Texas as well. And we are 3-tier. So it's very difficult because it has to go through a distributor. Well, none of the distributors want to pick it up because they're like, well, you're not going to sell any of these bottles, so we're just going to sit on them. So then they want him to turn around and pay for all the 200 what bottles. And he's like, but all these other guys go to Seelbach, or they go to this. Why can't we just do that? And they're like, nope, that's not how this particular one has to go. So it's like, it is the bane, which, okay, I'm not poo-pooing distributor, because here's the thing. If anything good came out of COVID, it was better distribution. I will say that it was that consumer-led distribution, like with you click on the link and you can get the bottle delivered to your house. That's great, but there's still a lot of work to be done when you have people like, and I'm not trying to talk crap about them, but when you get people like RNDC sitting on bottles for years and years and not releasing them, and then releasing all of them at a premium, that's shady. And why are you doing that? So like, we all have to work together. And I lump myself in that, because as a consumer, I lump myself into that because I don't want to pay an absorbent price for it. And I don't want to have to be like, hey, this bottle came out in 2022. Why is it on the shelf now? That type of thing. So I totally understand the woes of distribution. And I know each state in itself is inherently different. Obviously, there's some that are easier markets to get into because they have more people, obviously.
Yeah.
But also, like, it is hard out there. Like you're saying, making the whiskey is only part of the battle. Yeah. Once you fine tune it, get everything. Okay. We think this is good. Everything's good on it. Then you're like, okay, for one, you got to sit on it for, like this bottle that we're sipping on is 9 years old. So you got to sit on it for 9 years before you can sell it, which is kind of like one of those things you're waiting for your kid to go to college type thing. You're like, okay, come on. And then once you do, you're like, okay, now we have to recreate that or get close to it again. And how has that been? Like, okay, you sent your first bottles to market, be it vodka, whatever, it doesn't matter. We're starting at the beginning, right? And then you do you wait with bated breath, or do you like get on the still, let's do more?
No, we just started laying it down in hopes that because especially with the whiskey. So the vodka is obviously a little bit easier because I can turn vodka in 7 days, 4 to 5 days, whatever. So the vodka itself, but the challenging part with the vodka with sweet potatoes is, it's a low producer. So, but with the rye whiskey, I mean, you think about 16 years ago when we started this, rye wasn't even very popular. Like, Whistle Pig hadn't come out and blown up yet. Like, they kind of put rye back on the map. It was like they were all coming out. We'd already been laying it down, and obviously there's people making rye whiskey, but it wasn't really even a thing. Like, people had forgotten about it. And so
absolutely,
that's part of the reason I didn't really dive in, 400%, because I don't do anything half-ass, but I was just laying down as much as I could, which we had a real small still back then. So, it was just, we were putting away as much as I could. And then all of a sudden, when we launched, it was an opposite effect of when we launched the vodka. So we launched our vodka, the world's first sweet potato vodka, got it out to market. And, we did fairly well in the beginning, and it's definitely a challenge because vodka is so prevalent, like it's everywhere and it's cheap to make. But yeah, we gained some traction and it sold well. But it was definitely challenging. And then we launched our rye, 4 years later on a 4-year-old 100% rye. And we had 4 barrels. Like, that's all we had. The first batch was 4 barrels. And I'm like, as hard as vodka was to sell, I was like, man, we're just going to put all 4 barrels out there. It's going to be so hard to sell. And we literally sold it out in weeks. And then the distributor calls and is like, hey, can we get some more of that? And I'm like, I don't have any more ready for 6 months. And then I'm like, so for the first 2 years, it was kind of a good problem. It was like, we were allocated and we were like, okay, so we knew we were onto something. And so for the first 4 years, we trended well. And then it was all of a sudden, Jack Daniels had rye, Jim Beam had rye, and everybody had rye. I'm like, what? What the hell's going on, right? We still have a rare mash bill of that 100% rye, and we've laid other mash bills out that are going to come out, in the next couple of years.
Right.
But that was our thing. And initially was just, I want to be different. I want to be good at what we do, but I want to be different. That's why we made sweet potato vodka. That's why we made Merced Rye whiskey. It's our 100% rye. It's completely a different grain than a lot of the ryes out there. And the terroir that we grow in, which you can now taste in a lot of our whiskeys. And it kind of gives us a signature profile.
It really does. And I can tell you, just sipping this a little bit, it has a sweetness to it, but it also has this I'm going to call it umami, for lack of a better word, like a saltiness, like a salinity to it, which is really, really intriguing me. And obviously this one being at higher proof, you're getting all the oils and stuff like that as well, which is what you want in a good rye whiskey. And I will tell you, David, from day one, once I started doing the show, I know I wanted to be, I love all whiskey. Don't get me wrong. Bourbon's great. I love Scotch and Irish and all the other things, but rye whiskey and American single malt have been kind of my two little things that I've kind of globbed onto, because there's just so much cool stuff talking to different rye whiskey producers how they do it just that much different, and it tastes completely different. You know, I side by side this with Dad's Hat up in Pennsylvania. They're the same basic whiskey. I mean, quote unquote, you know, they're rye whiskeys, but they taste absolutely different. And that is what's so cool about whiskey in general is it doesn't matter who's making it. You could give somebody your mash bill, which is 100% obviously, but like you could give somebody the grains, everything. They're not going to make it the same way that you make it today, which is really, really a cool thing. They could be down the street with your grains doing the same thing. It's not going to taste the same because there is some sort of setting with all of this stuff. And you guys doing it from the farm and you know, it really shows it, like you take the ownership to the whiskey. Does that make sense?
No, for sure. And, you know, and I tell you this quite a bit lately is people have, if you'd asked me even like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, you know, you think terroir makes a big difference in whiskey? And I'd have probably said no. But as we've learned, the terroir out here does make a big difference. And we've had some, like I call them funky batches that happened due to so we farm about 2,000 acres, and you know, in our sweet potato ground, we also own our land, and then we also rent some land. And so when we rent, like we'll have neighbors that farm almonds. When their almond orchard's ready to come out, they typically call us and they're like, hey, you want to rent the ground for a few years? So we go in, we take the almond trees out, we get rid of all the wood, the roots, pick up everything, clean the ground. Because we have a ton, you know, we own like 70 tractors. Like we just, so we clean house, we clean the fields up, and then we farm sweet potatoes on them. Typically 4 to 5 years, depending on how long the owner wants to give it up. So when we're farming our own land, we go 1 year sweet potatoes, 1 year rye. 1 year sweet potatoes, 1 year. We want to give the land a break because sweet potatoes are, you know, they use a lot of nutrients.
Right.
And years ago, we didn't have enough land to do that, but now we own enough that we're able to rotate year to year, especially with our organic fields. But when we rent, you know, the neighbor has the field, he definitely wants it back. So we typically, the first year, plant it in rye, and then we farm it typically like 2 to 3 years in a row, let it sit one, and then farm it again. So we can retain our money back from cleaning up the ground, but also because of that crop rotation, we kind of get what we get on the soil. So we've gotten real picky, but we had a field that was a little bit more of most of our soil out here is super sandy. And so if I would have told you, you know, why I would have said the terroir doesn't make a difference is because like our soil out here, 99% of it's all the same.
Right.
But we happen to get one field, you know, it's a little bit of ways out there, and the soil starts to change, and it gets a little more clay loam than sandy loam.
Okay.
And then in 2016, we had this field that was a little more clay loam, which we don't typically farm.
Right.
And then we planted our Merced Rye on it. And that year, our average rainfall here in where we live is about 12 inches a year. Okay. Well, that year we got 19 and a half inches of rain. So we got a lot of rain. And the Merced Rye, which typically only generates about 55% starch versus a standard rye that'll go 65 to 70% starch.
Right.
We actually went into like 63% starch range in this field because it was so heavily soiled and the water retention. So, you know, I'm like, oh, well, 63% starch. I'm just going to take all the rye from this one field. So we distilled it off, and White Dog, very, you know, there was a little bit of a flavor profile difference. It's a little bit sweeter, but I thought, yeah, it's fine. So we saw a little bit more production, which was great, and got a little bit of a sweeter profile. I'm like, great. Well, then we start pulling these barrels at 8 years old, and we're like, what the, heck, like this is funky. Like it completely changed the heavy soil, all the water. So the field was very wet most of the year, and the rye actually tastes like wet grass, like almost like a vegetal,
Yeah.
like young, kind of like a young malted scotch. And I'm not talking like young, like 10-year-old malty scotch. I'm talking like a 5 or 6-year-old scotch, 3-year-old scotch. Like it tasted like that without the smoke, no smoke.
Right.
But what's funny is I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this. And some of my staff were like, oh no, it's good. It's just different. So we put it in a bottle, and we started tasting people on it, and people are like, oh, this is kind of cool and funky, but it definitely wouldn't be my go-to. I was like, to me, it screws up an old fashioned, like, and that's my drink. So I'm like, and every time they'd make me an old fashioned at our bar at the distillery, and I'm like, and they'd use that, I'm like, don't use that in my old fashioned. But it's funny, we found these scotch drinkers who love this. Like they don't like rye, but they come to buy this batch of rye, which we don't have much of it left.
Right.
Because they fell in love with it. They're like, I don't like rye whiskey. I got a bottle of this and I just want to buy more of it. And I'm like, well, if you don't like rye, what do you drink? And they're like, I drink scotch. But I love this. And I'm like, interesting, because it's not my favorite. And it's like, I don't like, but we do get people that are like, man, I want to buy a bottle because it's so cool and different. But I think it's more because they can educate somebody on it, right? And talk about, hey, this is terroir, and this is what happens when you grow it in this, and it's an educational piece. And so we had this few, batches that we made that were kind of funky, and so it's like, but terroir definitely makes a difference.
Well, and it also, like, the fact that you didn't try to blend that in with the rest of your stuff, and try and make it work. The fact that you left it kind of alone and was like, okay, this is weird, but somebody's going to like it. Like it's still a thing. And obviously at 8, 9 years old, you're like, okay, we got to do something with this, because it's hitting a threshold where it's going to start over oaking. And we can talk about that in a minute. But like, there is a terminal length on a barrel, especially in different climates. Obviously, if you're in Scotland or Ireland, you can get 25-year age statements or something like that. But in America, it's very rare that you're going to do that. Even Pappy, Pappy 23, it sits on the very bottom shelf, where it's really cool and damp down there. Just kind of leave it alone and it's fine. So it's really cool that you guys kind of separated that, saw what it was, but then you were like, this doesn't fit really, I hate to say your flavor profile, but it does showcase something in not only what you're producing, but like you're saying, in the terroir as well. And a lot of people don't think that terroir has a lot to do with whiskey, but I'm like, I could hand you a Texas whiskey right now, distilled the same way. It's going to taste completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can't tell me that terroir doesn't have an effect on something.
No, it definitely does. And not even just so what we like, if you come out to do a barrel pick, what I taste people on now is, it's not just that funky whiskey because of the heavy dirt and the rain, but even the fields that are farmed in sweet potatoes year over year, that rye whiskey versus, so we also farm almonds. And so when we pull an orchard out, like I said, we plant it in rye, and we'll probably farm it in rye for a few years. And if I take, so an orchard typically stays in play, minimum 15 years up to 30 years, depending on the quality, how good the orchard is and how well it does, how dense it was planted. So it stays in almonds for basically, 15 to 30 years. And then, and so, there's not a lot going on in that soil. It's just almond roots, and there's nothing being, other than the fertilizer being put on, which the trees are mostly absorbing. There's really no organic matter other than a little bit of chicken manure that we use here and there to boost up the nitrogen, but that's very limited. And so when you taste rye whiskey that's had sweet potatoes grown on it year over year versus what comes out of the rye field versus what comes out of a rye field, an almond field versus what comes out of a rye field that's been maybe grown in rye 2 or 3 years without the sweet potatoes transitioning to organic, they all taste different. And so our signature, what I think most people know us for, is that sweet potato rye, that where you get the complexity, and people are like, how do you get these apple and citrusy notes into the rye? Like you don't see us get a lot of dill or mint like a typical rye. You see more, citrus forward or mostly stone fruit, I should say, not really citrus. You get the stone fruit where you'll get like apricot and you'll get some, cinnamon apples and things like that. That comes from those sweet potatoes, because we farm 10 to 12 different varieties of sweet potatoes, and those sweet potatoes add that. That's where you get that complexity in our whiskey, which is why, a lot of people are like, why is Corbin Cash Rye so freaking different? And that's pretty much it.
And that is so cool because you have all of this different ground to play in, like you can do. And then also, like for a whiskey nerd like myself, you can like kind of go through them and be like, yeah, you can tell this one was in an almond field, or this one was, had rye in it for a couple of years because it's more rye-esque, or this one has a sweet note, or this one has that almondy marzipan type note to it. I don't know if it would have that or not, but I'm just spitballing. It's really cool that you're using all of this different land and recultivating it. It reminds me of a distillery that has nothing to do with you guys and totally different type of grain, which is JT Mellick, doing the same thing with rice, because they'll do one season rice crop, the next season is crawfish. And the crawfish go in there and do their thing, and then they come back and do their rice crop. Different seasons. Obviously, you don't have the crawfish in the rice crop, but it is so cool to see that, and you see the different overlays and the symbiotic relationship that the ground or the lily pads or whatever you got, the ground has with these different products you're putting in there, and it just goes to show that like. And this is going to get a little woo-woo, I guess, but like really making whiskey is a little bit of alchemy as well. Like you're literally taking all of these parts, putting them together and just hoping that they work. And when you can pinpoint this came, and obviously you guys do very strict, spreadsheets on everything that you're doing, because you have to, as a business, you have to have everything logged and everything, where it goes. So seeing the trend of like, let's say, oh, this has had sweet potato in it, and now the whiskey is having this type of profile coming off of a sweet potato field or something like that. So it's really cool, and it just kind of shows the growth not only of the company, but like of what you can do with different farms. And that's what a lot of people don't understand when you're making whiskey. It's great in the glass. Don't get me wrong. It's great in the glass, but like you have to think it starts at that farm, and it starts at the grain that is put into the ground. And if the soil sucks, the grain's probably going to suck too. I mean,
no, for sure. And what's, and what's crazy is, as farmers, we've had to learn how to survive, and not all grains grow anywhere. I know Colby from Frey Ranch had mentioned to me that one time that their seed supplier had sent them some Merced Rye, and he goes, "Oh, we have a winter rye," because they were out of the variety that they farm, and so they shipped them some Merced Rye, and he said we planted it, and he goes, it got up, and then as soon as we had our first like frost, it just smoked it. And I said, yeah, because it's a winter rye, but it's a California winter rye. And that's what a lot of these, even the seed guys, don't understand, is they think, oh, all winter rye is a winter rye. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, it's very, so when you look at where Merced Rye grows, it's pretty much only on the West Coast. And, it grows throughout our valley here. And then they plant a little bit of it up in Washington and, like Oregon areas in some of their valleys, but it's mostly just for ground cover, because if you look at how our rye grows, if you look at rye, oats, barley, they all kind of grow the same. They get 3.5 feet tall. They got big fat heads on them with big heavy grain. Our rye gets 6.5 feet tall. It's very, very spindly and real tiny seeds. Like they're not like they're very, the heads are really small because at 6 foot tall and the spindly shaft, but why our rye grows the way it does is, and it's so good for our soil, is that root system is double the length of the height. So if we're 6.5 feet tall, we're 13.5 feet down in the soil. And so the Merced Rye actually mines all of that nitrogen and potash that leaches past our sweet potato roots because of our sandy soil.
Right.
It brings it all back to surface. And when my great grandfather started planting it, he didn't know why it did better, but he just said, hey, the sweet potatoes always do better where the rye is. And it really wasn't until like the late 80s, early 90s that we discovered that the root system, the reason the sweet potatoes do so good is the root system's going down 13.5 feet and bringing all that nutrients back to the surface.
Wow.
And so it works really well here for us, especially in our sandy soil. We have a hard time keeping organic matter and obviously water retention, because it really is like beach sand out here without the salt.
Right. And
we can get 2.5 inches of rain today, and tomorrow there's no water puddles. Like it just, yeah.
I mean, and so that's another thing with the whole terroir part of it, is working with the climate that you have, right? Like you're saying, you get all this rain and then all of a sudden it's gone. So do you water periodically throughout? Is there a regiment that you do, or do you just let it grow as you
rye in the 108? So this is the other reason we farm Merced Rye, is because it's very drought tolerant. Okay. So in the 108-9 years we've been farming this, we've had to pull out the sprinkler pipe, the big aluminum sprinkler pipe, and irrigate it probably 3 to 4 times in the last 108 years. But you got to think, so a lot of the ground that we're farming, we can't flood irrigate it. So we don't have any way to irrigate the rye. So the only time we can irrigate it is if we plant it in November, we get a spot of rain and we get it to germinate, but then it goes 3 weeks to 6 weeks without any rain. We start looking at it. If it's not foggy and moist here, it starts to dry out. Then we're like, okay, if we're going to get any kind of a crop, we put it out. We get one irrigation shot at it, and then that's it. And then, so it'll grow with as little of 8 inches of rain, where most crops won't. But it's really depending on the timing of the rain. It can go a long time without it, and then this year we got a lot of early rain and we got a ton of fog, but no heat units. So right now, where the rye would typically be, 4.5 feet tall, right now it's about. So a week ago, it's funny, my wife, were walking and she's like, it wasn't that tall yesterday. I'm like, no, but we're getting heat units today, right? So it's been like a foot tall for a month and a half. And then we're getting this 70-degree weather. All of a sudden it's 6 inches taller today, right? And it grows fast.
Right.
So, but you only have that short window. If it ain't full grown by May, dry down is end of May, early June. And if it's not at its full peak, you're done. That's where it's going to stop.
Right. And so what do you do at that point? When it gets to a certain point, or obviously you as a farmer, which, that comes with its own woes in itself. But as a farmer, you look at the weather daily, I'm sure, and you're seeing if you're going to get any precipitation or anything like that. And is it going to help or hurt your crop? And also, like you say, you and your wife walking the fields and stuff like that, you're visually inspecting it at all times, just to make sure that you're not having a bad crop. It's not diseased. It's not anything like that. So when do you know, hey, this is its terminal length, it's not going to get any bigger because we didn't get enough rain or whatever? You're not getting those full stalks like you want.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, like there really isn't shit you can do about it. So
You're right.
you pray for rain, and
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
at the end of the day, if it gets, we can still get a crop even if it only gets 4 feet tall. The the starch content, depending on the rain and stuff, may not be ideal.
Mm,
But if we get the rain at the right times, even if we don't get a tall, the reason, excuse me, for whiskey making, the height isn't a real factor as much as it is, did we get the heat units and did we get enough water to at the dough end where we got enough starch.
right.
As a distiller, I don't care if it got 3 foot tall or if it got 6 foot tall, as long as I get. But as a farmer, the reason I want it 6 feet tall is because that root system went down and it's mining all those nutrients. So there's two things that it doesn't just mine the nutrients, but it also chokes out the weeds. And so, years ago we used to think, oh, Merced Rye gets tall and it just shades out the weeds. But then I'm telling my dad one day, I'm like, we're looking at it, and I'm like, there ain't that much shade in here. The sun's beating through because it's so spindly. It's not tight like malted barley.
Right.
Malted barley, man, it's thick. I'm like, it's not the height that shades out the weeds. The root system is so aggressive. It's like it just ties up the roots. It ties up the soil and opens up the ground, but it chokes all the weeds out. And it's so having that massive root system is what helps us as farmers, not necessarily as distillers. So, so it's a combination of things we want, but at the end of the day, the grain is what helps us for distilling and planting for next year, but the root system on our rye is really what helps us as farmers. So
exactly, because it's, and I'm not trying to say this in a negative way at all. It's almost like the whole distillation thing is kind of a secondary thing because the farm is what has made the money over and over again, year after year. So it's like you have to, I hate to say that comes first, because now the whiskey, and I mean, you know as well as I do, most people in the whiskey industry that aren't just going out and picking out the Jack and the Jim Beam know Corbin Cash by now, right? They've seen the bottle, or they've at least heard of it in the YouTube scene or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a name, but at the same time, when it comes to having a 100-year-old farm, it is also the crop that matters. And so it's not, yes, you want to make whiskey and that's fine. And maybe you have a low yield on your rye. You just don't make as much rye that year, right? So that you can make more sweet potatoes and more almonds and whatever else you're trying to make. And that's where this is one of the things I've always said. Whiskey's great, but whiskey's not the whole story, right? Whiskey is a subsidiary of the story. Like the story you're telling me right now has a lot to do with whiskey, but it also has to do with a lifestyle and generations of families that are being supported by this farm. And so for you to be able to say, hey, we can subsidize this rye that we're using for cover crop and make whiskey out of it and make good whiskey out of it. And then turn around and make a little bit of money with that. But then still fall back to the farm, because that's what, not only what but it's what the family grew up in and what the family loves. And there's some sort of heritage in that a lot of these, and I'm not trying to poo-poo like non-distilling producers and stuff like that, but they don't have that. Is all they have is a fanciful name on a bottle that they sourced. They don't have the background to go with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think I did an interview the other day, and one of the questions I get asked a lot is like, so how much of your product, your produce, like the sweet potatoes or the rye, go into go to the distillery.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's not that much, but I think what people forget is, you think about farm distilleries, and most of them, like Frey Ranches, are probably a great example. I know there's some far north up in Minnesota's and stuff. There's a lot of grain farmers that, if all we did was farm grain, like, hell yes, I would have been probably a distiller a long time ago, because, you know, what are you growing grain for? Cow feed, you know, seed for other, you know, other farms, things of that nature. And they don't pay a lot for that kind of stuff. Like, it's hard to make a living. And so absolutely you want to diversify and find something else to be able to do with your grains. But we're like fruit and vegetable and nut farmers first, and then the whiskey is like a secondary thing. So it's like when, like, if, you know, I would say if you went to somebody like Frey Ranch and asked Colby, like, how much of your grains, probably, I would say probably 90% of it goes into what they do now. For us, it's a little bit different. It's about 1%. You know, I would say rye wise, 85% of it goes into whiskey now.
Okay.
And to go away into barrels.
Right.
Because, and the other 15% is saved to replant the next year.
Right.
But when it comes to sweet potatoes, our vodka, our gin, our liqueurs, and our barrel-aged single barrel sweet potato spirit, that's like 1%, because we harvest 40 million pounds of sweet potatoes a year. And that goes to, you know, Albertsons, Safeway, Kroger's, our local Berkeley Bowls, and our nugget markets. And so at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're, you know, we have 200 people out there harvesting sweet potatoes by hand, and those go into storage. And then the byproduct of like diversification is very small on the sweet potato side of it. Where on the rye side, it's, you know, it's a bigger portion, because I don't have anything to do with the Merced Rye isn't good for making bread. It's not good for really doing anything else. I mean, it's really not ideal for even making whiskey. If you had to farm Merced Rye to try to make whiskey, because it's such a low producer, as some people that have tried making whiskey where they have found out, and they call me and they're like, man, like, why does the production suck on this? I'm like, because it's only like 50% starch. Like,
because it sucks. I'm sorry.
And the only reason I'm using it is because I
got a lot of it.
I got a lot of it, and I have to plant it. It's a necessity. Right. Like, so it makes sense for us, where if you were trying to farm it to make whiskey, it would make absolutely no sense for a lot of people, you know?
Right. And it goes back to, you know, the people in place, right? Like, you're using this particular rye grain because it works where you're at. Somebody else is going to be like, no, why wouldn't you use a malted rye or a blah, 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 you know, Brizo or whatever? Because this is what we have, and this is home. I am distilling home and giving it to you, and it shows up in the glass. I'm sorry, it does. That shows up in the glass. It's really a sense of place, and that, I feel like that's kind of been the base of this whole thing, is that sense of place where you're like, man, we're doing all this, and this is secondary, and it's great, and people are loving it. But like, at the same time, like, when you have families to feed, and you said you have 200 people out there picking all this stuff, like, the whiskey's a nice nightcap when you come home. You know, it's not really one of those things where you're like, you know, and we can talk about the awards you guys have won and stuff like that, but again, that's just icing on the cake, isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, you know, it's like, as much as, you know, thankfully I don't have a real big ego, because I would, you know, I would love to, you know, and I want to hang my hat on this, and I hope, you know, it's, you know, the name Corbin Cash, it's my son. You know, it's his first and middle name. And I, you know, and I just kind of figure, like, hey, if this thing ever takes off, it's probably going to be when he's old enough to run the business. Right. And hopefully he'll want to do it. And, you know, but we got a long ways for that. But ultimately, for me, what's important is, you know, keeping the next thing rolling and figuring out the next diversification. And a lot of people ask us, like, so why don't, you know, you guys have this big farm, why don't you farm your own corn? Because we buy the corn that I get from my neighbors. Well, they're not my exact neighbors, but they're down the road. And it goes back to sustainability and California farming. Sandy soil is not ideal to grow corn in. We can absolutely, we do grow corn for our vegetable gardens, and we grew corn in the past. You know, years ago when we farmed a lot of different crops, but it's like financially and water sustainability wise, it makes absolutely no sense to farm corn here. And I would be planting it just to make whiskey. And that kind of goes against our whole mantra of like being good to the land and what makes, what makes absolute sense. So why not buy my off grades of corn from my neighbor who's going to be throwing that away anyway?
Right.
And so that's what we do. That's where we get our corn. And, we get that from, basically right here local. And I take all their off grades, all their good stuff's going for hominy and tortilla chips and flour, corn tortillas. And so we get all the stuff that's broken, cracked, or round that they can't use.
Right.
And so that's part of our whole, our whole thing.
Yeah.
And
so
we did grow wheat, and we have grown wheat before, and it's just, but we can't time the rain anymore. Like our rain used to be a little more, it used to be more of a similar pattern, and the weather patterns have changed so much. So we don't plant wheat very often.
Right. Because wheat is a temperamental crop. It really is. Sure. It can go in and out. So you're saying you get corn. Does that mean you're doing a corn-based whiskey?
Well, we make bourbon. So,
okay.
And I'll send you some samples of the bourbon as well. So
awesome.
Yeah, our bourbons have been on fire. The problem is, like, I launched these. I didn't, we have a sour mash bourbon that we make that we've been making for a little while. And I really was never going to make bourbon because we don't grow corn. And so, and bourbon's saturated, right?
It is.
The market was saturated. But then I got a lot of flack from people like, hey, you're making whiskey.
I get it.
Why aren't you making bourbon? And I'm like, well, this is the reason. And they're like, well, you mean, and somebody once said to me, he's like, you mean there's not a lot of crappy corn around there you couldn't take up and make bourbon? And I'm like, that's a good question. And
yeah, probably.
I called up all the guys that I know that farm corn. I said, hey, you guys have off grades? Like, cause I'm thinking all of these guys grow for cattle feed. And then I realized, like, no, man, we grow for hominy, we grow for tortilla chips, we grow for, corn tortillas. And those corns for food consumption for these specific products have to be perfect. They need to be flat. They can't be round. They can't use crack corn. They can't use round corn. And I'm like, really? So started talking to them. They're like, yeah, man, I got all these off grades and we sell them for cow feed and hog feed. And I said, yeah, and they don't get paid crap for it, just like we didn't get paid crap for our sweet potatoes.
Right.
And so I'm like, well, you know what? This makes a lot of sense. I can pay them a little bit more and I can generate some bourbon out of it. And it was kind of just like, okay, we'll pay a little bit down. And then we've had some really great stuff roll out. And unfortunately, it didn't lay a lot of it down, but we're cranking it out now. So for the future.
There you go. So is it obviously rye, corn and then rye, or is it corn, wheat, or
so
what
it
type
is corn,
of, what
rye,
type of
barley. So
okay.
This is our single. It looks very much like our bourbon.
Okay.
So this is our single barrel bourbon. It's a red label, and our mash bill on that is it's a 75% yellow corn that comes from our, there's specific varieties that are farmed here that our guys farm. So 75% yellow corn, 15% Merced Rye, 10% malted barley. And then we have our sour mash bourbon that we make. And this is a 70% white corn, 25% Merced Rye, and 5% malted barley.
Okay.
And this is the reason we did the sour mash, which is what I kind of came out with first. Because the white corn is a lot more prevalent here, and it's a sweet corn, and I'm not a sweet drinker. I'm a spicy drinker. Right. So that's why I was like, okay, so I'm going to make it a sour mash to dumb down the sweetness.
Right.
And then we did
and then up the rye.
A high rye.
Yeah.
And then, but this, because I wanted to kind of stay true to the Kentucky sour mash, the way they do things.
Right.
We laid this down in the barrels at 110 proof, and then we temperature controlled it, humidified it.
Okay.
And it came out of the barrel at 106 proof. And so we just did it at cask strength. So it's 106. Awesome. And so it's a lot softer. It's funny, even though it's a high rye, because the corn, so it's a sweet white corn, it definitely drinks like a sour mash bourbon. Like it doesn't have that high rye taste like most of them do.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. That and that's here's the thing. Going back to what we said before, like you're using local to you, and you're like, why would I create corn? I don't need corn on my farm. So
Yeah.
like I was going to ask the question, obviously, as a guy I spoke of earlier about single malt, about doing a single malt. But here's the thing: why would you do a single malt? You don't need to create single malt. Not that you won't, but I don't want to put the words in your
We've
mouth.
already done some, but it it's not ready yet, but that'll be a future conversation we'll have. And
absolutely.
You know why I did it? Because of these guys right here. Have you heard of Old Line up in Maryland?
Oh yeah.
Dude, I love those guys have inspired me. I'm like, not that I'm going to be making tons of single malt,
right?
But I'm just like, why can't I get some California malt?
Oh, please do.
Grown here,
yep.
and let's play with it out here because Old Line, man, they're making some just delicious stuff. And I'm like, as a farmer, it inspires me. But the cool thing is that we do have fields that if it didn't make sense and I could make a really great single malt, there are some California malts that I've discovered that are kind of drought tolerant that we could grow on our land. And so, and believe me, never was a Scotch drinker, never was a single malt guy. Until somebody educated me, because I thought all Scotch was Lafroig, right? That was my first Scotch, and I'm like, I hate Scotch. And what's funny is now I like Lafroig in small doses, and especially mixed with some great cocktails because I love the smokiness of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But again, somebody schooled me in single malts, and I'm like, oh, like I absolutely love single malt, like, but then I'm like, oh, American single malt, and then 21090, it turned me on to Old Line, and I went out there to their distillery, and we've done events out there with them, and it just, dude, their stuff is so good.
Yep.
And I'm like, well, shit, like I got to look for some malt that'll grow around here. And some of my neighbors, they have malted barley. So yeah, we can absolutely get malt right here close, and that's what we're doing.
See, the people ask, and you supply them with what they need. And that's the whole thing. It's like you're staying true to what you're doing, but yet you understand that, like, hey, this is a thing. We need to not to jump on the bandwagon, because I'm not trying to say it like that, but like,
yeah.
If you guys are creating the rye whiskey that you are, which you obviously are, and then now you're doing the bourbons, and the next step would be American single malt. And one of the other things I wanted to ask, and I'm sure people have asked you this multiple times before, but you have the almond farms. Have you ever thought about an almond liqueur?
Oh yeah, we're doing that.
Okay. And then my secondary thought to that was finishing one of your whiskeys in an almond liqueur barrel.
Yeah. So what we're doing right now is, and I don't know if you know this, but so we just released our first one about, it was around November. So we have this label's orange. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's a single barrel sweet potato. So we're basically distilling our sweet potato alcohol. Well, so how this came to be was I wanted to make the world's first sweet potato whiskey.
Why not?
And then, of course, I started laying it down. We distilled it just like our rye, just like our bourbon, 135 to 140 proof off the still. New charred American oak, heavy char, and laid these things down. And then when I went to label it, the government's like, you can't call it whiskey. There's no grain in it. And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to call it? And they're like, not whiskey. And I'm like, shit. They're like, well, you can, it's a distilled specialty spirit. And I'm like, where's the shelf space for that? Like,
there's not one.
Especially, you think about 10, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So then we started. So then I was like, oh shit, I got all these 5-year-old barrels of sweet potato spare. What am I going to do with it? And that's when our sweet potato liqueur came to be initially. And so it was, my mom makes these these holiday sweet potato bars, we call them, and they're basically sweet potatoes with cinnamon, vanilla, nutmeg, a little bit of clove spice. And I was like, well, dude, what if I took all these spices and infused the whiskey? And so that's the first thing that we have. So we have a truly barrel-aged sweet potato liqueur that now has 7-year-old sweet potato spirit in it, infused with cinnamon, vanilla, and nutmeg, and only 2% brown sugar. Because again, I don't like sweet.
Right.
But if I didn't add at least 2% sugar, I couldn't call it a liqueur.
Right.
So I'm like, well, then what is it? It's a DSS. And I'm like, there's no sugar.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
Yeah, so it's not a thing. So then we did the liqueur. And then, and so I've been sitting on, like, I have like 300 to 400 barrels. Actually, no, it's rough. We just laid down another one. So we're sitting on close to 400 barrels now of this sweet potato alcohol. We just released our first 11-year-old that I'm going to be releasing. 11-year-old sweet potato. So we did one with a YouTube, 21090, the YouTube group.
Yeah.
They came out, they tasted it. I'm like, hey man, why don't you try this barrels? Let me know what you think, Andy. I just like, people I tried, they love it, but I'm not sure. Like, I don't know if it'd go for single barrel. Well, he tasted it and his mind was blown. He's like, oh my God, we got to do a thing about this. Like, people need to know about this. So, we tasted their group on it, and so it got really good response. I'm like, hey, you guys do the first single barrel then. And we sold 180 bottles out in 3 hours. It was insane. And and then as whiskey groups come out, and I'll be sending you some samples of this, it really, what's interesting about it is it really drinks more like a really well played Armagnac. Like, it's got these rich, again, stone fruit notes rather than grain notes. So you get these fruit flavors, these apricots and apple spices, but you still get that little bit of grain note from the Merced Rye, from the terroir, but you really get a more fruit, like a stone fruit forward with spices, because we are using the heavy charred barrels. And it's like, we just had another whiskey group come out, and they were picking a rye whiskey. And then I had a guy call me after, and he's like, hey, can I just buy that barrel for myself? Or like, I don't know if I can take the whole barrel, but I'll buy half. And then and then he started calling the rest of the group, and they're like, yeah, we'll buy some cases. So I think that's going to be our next signature thing. But a happy accident. But the great thing that happened, and how this has really come to be, was, up until the finished bourbon craze, we couldn't put an age statement on it. But a lot of people didn't realize. So, all these, and I'm assuming it's because the big guys have a lot of pull, but, a finished bourbon is not bourbon. It's a DSS.
It is.
And a lot of people don't know that. But then you got all these guys putting in, 6, 8, 9-year-old finished bourbons. They want an age statement on that. And before, we couldn't. But when the TTB reclassified that and said, okay, now you can put an age statement, that's why we can put an age statement on our sweet potato spirit, because it's now a DSS. But I argued with the TTB on this for years. Like, look, I follow all the rules. You have all my records. I've been doing everything we do for bourbon, for the rye. You can't put an age statement on a DSS. That's what they kept telling me. Just like you can't put an age statement on a liqueur. And then all of a sudden they changed it. Well, we still can't put an age statement on a liqueur. And just like a few people got barrel-aged gin passed, and then all of a sudden, nobody can call it barrel-aged gin except for the guys who got grandfathered in.
Yep.
And so little things like this happen. And so, lo and behold, it helped us out, because I don't think anybody I think everybody would assume this is really young stuff that we're putting in the single barrel if we couldn't put an age statement on it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's super hard to do, right? Like it's one of those things where you're like, okay, where do I go from here? Like I've got all this aged stock and I don't know what to do with it, and I don't want to sell it as this. So you're making your hands are kind of tied. Obviously, when you're dealing with government agencies, your hands are kind of tied. You have to follow certain guidelines. But it is so cool to see groups come out and be like, this is an amazing product, whatever it is, a whiskey, DSS, I don't care what it is, barrel aged vodka, whatever you want to call it. It's absolutely fantastic. So that is super cool that people are seeing not only that, but they're seeing that you guys aren't playing games. You're literally trying to present the best products you can. And David,
well, I think that goes back to our conversation earlier too about
go ahead
about hazmats. Yeah. It's like it speaks to the point of like if it's good, right? Yeah. It's whether if it's 160 proof and it's good, great. If it's 160 proof and it sucks, blah. And if it's 120 proof and it sucks, who cares, right? Like it speaks to like you know, you want to make, that's why you got to take care about the product. At the end of the day, whatever you're making, if it's good and people will drink it, you know, it might not be the next big thing, but, you know, and also what's helped with us, the diversification, because, you know, we wouldn't probably be making, you know, all the other spirits, a lot of different spirits that we're getting into, even agave spirits and stuff. But a lot of that happened because we have a tasting room.
Right.
See, and up until 2016, we couldn't even have a tasting room and sell bottles. And so as we talked about coming to market with new products, it's so challenging. Right. I would, you know, we would have just stuck with the staples, but now we're able to do this and make other stuff and sell at our tasting room and have some really cool stuff that's distillery only. So, right. You know, it's, you know, taking the St. George approach, like I've seen what those guys have done for years, you know, watching close there in San Francisco, and Lance is just a mastermind in what he does. And
he really is.
He really is. And he's so good at what he does. And I was always like, but they've always had a tasting room, right? They're right there in San Francisco, and it dry. And it's like, I'm like, man, it's so cool that they can do all these things. And now that, you know, now I see it, like we're in the middle of nowhere. We're kind of like, you know, we're probably not quite as a middle of nowhere as Spray Ranch, but we're, you know, we're out in the middle and we're in Atwater, and it's like, who's going to stop in Atwater? So we didn't open our tasting room until right before COVID hit, because one of my fellow distillers, you know, Sean Venus and Venus Spirits in Santa Cruz, he just kept, David, you need to open a tasting room. Like, I'm like, man, things are tight. Like everything's going on, distribution. He's like, but I'm like, dude, you're in Santa Cruz. You're like you're in a touristy spot. Like, and he's got a successful restaurant and the tasting room. I'm like, but you're in Santa Cruz. But honestly, like him talking to me about it and kind of finally convinced me it's the best thing that we did. And surprisingly, a lot of people going to Yosemite, we get them to stop off and they pick up some bottles and they take them with them. And so it's been probably one of the best things we've done, you know, and it helped us definitely get through COVID when all the restaurants and bars were closed and all that.
Absolutely. Okay. I got one more question.
Yep.
I mean, I got a lot of questions. I feel like we're aimed for a part 2, but the last question I want to ask is, and this is kind of a erroneous question, because like, where do you see Corbin Cash in the future? Where do you see the growth? I know in my sphere, it's all over the place, right? Do you want to see it on a more of a global market or more distribution within the United States? Where do you see it in the next, say, 5 years, 5 to 10 years?
You know, when I got into this thing, it was like I go big or go home kind of thing, right? And it's like it's been a humbling experience. Of course, I mean, if I had to be honest with myself, what would I love to see? Like, I would love to be, I mean, this is just me speaking for myself. Like, I would love to be what Jack Daniels is to Tennessee, right? I would love Corbin Cash to be, you know, when you think of Tennessee, who do you think? Jack Daniels or George Dickel, right? When you think of Kentucky, you know, you think Jim Beam. I mean, obviously there's a lot of big distilleries in Kentucky, but you know, the big one, the 250 years of Jim Beam, right? And it's just like you can't knock that. And like, obviously for me, like, it was like, we would love to be that someday, you know. It's like what Gallo has done for the wine business, you know, in California, not, you know, and not that I want to be the biggest, but we, you know, my dad, we're not the biggest farmers, but I'll tell you, my dad, he's built one of the best farms. Like and if you ask anybody in our area, like, you know, we're clean at farming. We do right by our people. Our average employee retention is 35 years. Wow. We have 3 generations of families that work for us. And that speaks to who, you know, my grandparents were, who my dad is, who, you know, and my dad's still running the farm because we're only 16 years apart. So, you know, he had me very young. And so that's another reason I kind of went off on my own tangent thing on the side, because I wasn't going to be the boss anytime soon.
Right. Yeah.
And
he's still very much in charge.
Oh no, and he's, you know, he's wanting to like start to thinking about, like, he'll never retire, but
absolutely,
he's thinking about like, I want to start going out and enjoying, because you know, he's worked since he was a kid, just like I have.
Amen.
But, you know, I didn't have my son until I was 35. I did it ass backwards from what him and my mom did. Like, they got, you know, married young and had a kid, and then you know, and then I'm like, I'm not doing it that way. I'm gonna have my fun, work hard, play harder.
Yep.
And then, you know, had my kid later in life. And but it's what's allowed me to do this. All that experience and actually investing in other types of businesses outside of the farm, you know, kind of is what brought this full circle. And in these older gentlemen who taught me how to drink wasn't farmers. They were, you know, they were guys that I owned restaurants, and I had a promotion company in Las Vegas. And that experience of owning businesses in Vegas and being introduced to these guys who drank really well, is what opened my mind to diversify my farm into something totally different. And so, you know, it's which, had I never done that, I'd probably just be farming sweet potatoes. So, you know, you got to put yourself out there, and you know, life experiences open your mind up to different things, right? And so that's kind of where we're here today. But yeah, to get to your question, I would love to be that, but most importantly, it's just, you know, I want to continue to make great things. And, you know, for us to get there, it's going to take a long time, but I mean, if I had it my way, that's where we would be, you know. Just, I want to be a staple for, you know, and a lot of it's because I have so much pride in what my family's built, you know.
Right. Absolutely.
It's not a me thing. It's just, I want to see the legacy go on. And I want to continue to support the families who have been working for us and supporting us all these years, because it's a lot of people. And it's definitely, farming is, you know, it's challenging across the nation. But California, as I'm sure you understand our regulations here, and the cost of living and the cost of fuel and just everything we pay 3 times more of. Why all the dairies are leaving California and going to Texas? Because
it's not me.
It's just a much business friendly state, right? And so, but you know, it's definitely, but we just can't pick up and move 2,000 acres. No, it just doesn't happen. So
that's hard to do. And I can tell you, the whiskey wouldn't taste the same. I can tell you that.
No, it wouldn't, you know. And, you know, honestly, man, minus out the taxes and the politics, California is a great state. Just like, you know, every state has their thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's, you know, unfortunately, I mean, we live 2 hours from the ocean. We live an hour from the mountains. I have 7 lakes within 30 minutes of me. I can be fishing, jet skiing, water skiing. I can be at the ocean and go surfing. I mean, we have it all, but we pay the price. But we pay the price.
But see that's the thing. Like, you'll have the spoils, but then you got to deal with the spoils.
You got to deal with everything else
as well. David, oh man, this has been a ride. I can see a part 2 in the future. It might be a year or so. Let's see how it goes. But
for sure,
one of the things that I've noticed throughout all this is your link back to family and back to what built you up to what you are. And that to me, it plays a special part in my heart, because obviously you're not nothing without your family and your background and your heritage. And there's a lot of people that are poo-pooing heritage right now. And I don't want to do that. And one of the things that you guys have showcased, not only in your whiskey, but just in the way that you talk, the way that you present yourself, is that you really care for your future and your children's future, and also representing your father's future as well, and his legacy, and your grandfather's, and keep going back. You know what I mean? But it is so cool to see that in today's age, because a lot of people are very much instant gratification, and they want that. I want it now, and you're in it. I feel like you're in it for the long haul. Like you're in it, you're doing this and you're making great product and you're doing all these cool things, but yet at the same time, you're still focused on creating a legacy for your family. And I can't commend you enough for that, because that is one of the things that I'm trying to do for my kids, just build them up and make them into great human beings, and also producing great human beings produces great human beings, and it continues on and on. And I want to commend you for that. And I also want to thank you so much for coming on here, hanging out with us. And right after this, and David, we talked about this, there will be a review of one of these said whiskeys that he's sending. So I'm holding you to it. No, there will be a review of one of these whiskeys. So stay tuned, guys. If you've been with us this long, stay tuned for a review of a really cool whiskey or something. It might be something else. It might not be a whiskey at all. It might be a DSS. Who knows?
You're gonna get a threshold of things, and so you can pick your favorite or the most and choose. Unique.
Absolutely. But I appreciate you so much for hanging out with me, and this has been a ride. And guys, I will have all of Corbin Cash's stuff down below, as you well know. There will be a full tasting, not only on this, but on a separate YouTube video as well. So y'all make sure you check all the stuff out. And I can't thank you enough, David, for hanging out with us. And y'all be good. Any last words?
Yeah, no, thank you. And, appreciate you reaching out. And, it's people like yourself that have helped, get us out there. And it's kind of to me, it's like, this is the advertisement this is the way I love to build things with people. And it's kind of that trust thing. It's kind of building symbiotic relationships, but also it's the whiskey community is like a big family. And that's really why I got into the business too, is once I learned, like, there's a culture here, there's a community, and it's not just big guys, but it's kind of crazy. Like, as I met small distilleries that were in it before I was, and realizing like their struggles and everything. And I learned from a lot of them. It's like, we didn't build some big fancy distillery out of the gate. Cause I realized, like, talking to some guys, I'm like, dude, this is a long game. This is not, well, and that's what I learned, had somebody made sweet potato vodka for me, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation, because it would have been like, go in. And so by happy stance, and everything that's happened in this to me has really just been a threshold of like trial and error and pivoting all the time. And, the fact that it was, I feel like it's destined that, nobody would make me sweet potato vodka, and I had to do it myself. And it's turned into something great, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I thank you again. Like it's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll get those samples out, and I look forward to hearing some feedback from you.
Awesome. Awesome.
All
Y'all
right,
be
Randall.
good.
Thank you.
Until next
All
time.
right. Cheers.
Be blessed. All right, guys. If you watched that far or listened that far into the podcast, then you get a special treat. I got the samples, and I got quite a few samples. I got a bottle actually, so you guys will be getting samples of this if you want some. This is the funkier rye whiskey that he was mentioning. But today I thought we would do something. It's not whiskey. Why not, right? This is the Corbin Cash DSP CA 15087 8-year sweet potato spirit, barrel number 12. Are you ready? 156 proof. Yes, sir. So let's get into it. Now, I'm not going to release this as a normal show. This is just going to tag to the bottom of the podcast, which is really cool. And I still have enough in there to enjoy if it's excellent, which I'm sure it's going to be. I don't know a whole lot of specs about this, only that it's sweet potato spirit, which to me sounds pretty magical. Woo! Hot one on the nose. Hot one on the nose coming in. Wow. I don't know how to really gauge sweet potato spirit, right? Would you gauge it more like a vodka, like a barrel-aged vodka, or would you gauge it more as a brandy? Because back in the day, they make brandy out of anything too. So, I mean, the oil coming off of that, it's like, this is a lot. It is fruity and perfumey on the nose. This is unlike anything I've ever smelled in my life. And I've smelled a lot of things. Some things not good. I am a plumber, as you well know. There is something there that I can't pinpoint. It could be sweet potato, right? There is an earthiness to this, undoubtedly an earthiness. And I'm sorry if you can hear my little air conditioner blowing in here. It is 83 degrees in the shed, and it is March. What are we doing? It's going to be a long summer. All right, let's get in on the sip. Not going to lie, I was a little scared of that. Wow. That is unique. It is not whiskey. Obviously, it does not taste like whiskey at all. It doesn't taste like cognac, Armagnac. It is so like perfumey, floral. There's something there. It's intriguing. I like it, but it's not something I would go to all the time, obviously. But I love it. It is so different and unique. And that's obviously, if you've listened to the podcast, you're gonna know that like this is special. This is not something that you just overlook, right? And the proof on it, good Lord. It is definitely proofy. Like this could take a lot of water. This could take a lot of water. I think I have one. Yeah, he sent over the vodka as well. Nice little sample bottles. Thank you very much. Then he sent over their sour mash bourbon at 106 proof. A 12-year double oaked rye whiskey, French and American oak at 128 proof. I'm excited to get into that one. And the 1917 Merced Rye whiskey at 123 proof. And then the two other big boys, the 10-year single barrel Merced Rye, 145 proof. And then the 8-year single barrel bourbon, barrel number 5 at 142 proof. So he sent over some bangers. But that's not what we're about. We're about this sweet potato spirit. You know, I've been lucky enough to try some gins and some barrel-aged gins and some barrel-aged vodkas and some eau de vies and aquavites and brandies, and other spirits besides whiskey. And this one is unique as them all. Like, this one stands out. I don't know if I would really know what it was if you poured it to me in a blind lineup, but it's definitely unique and very cool. So I'm gonna rate it for what it is, right? It's not a whiskey, right? So I'm gonna rate it for what it is, but I'm gonna have another little sip, and don't know if I'll finish all that because it's high proof. Mm. That earthiness that's on it is so unique. I don't even know how to describe it. I don't have words to describe what this tastes like. It is like rose water, but like it's very floral, like some gins are. Gins can be very floral, but doesn't have any of the juniper or anything like that. That's the best thing I can compare it to. But now, after talking with it in my mouth, it is hot on the tongue. Obviously, for the proof that you got, it is gonna be hot on the tongue. So I would rate this for what it is, for the spirit that it is. I would rate it at 8.5 for three reasons. For one, is it the best spirit I've ever had? No, it's not. I've had better Armagnacs or whatever, but it is so unique and different, and nobody's doing this, right? Nobody is doing this, and I am so very happy to have got a sample of this to try. And I'm going to sample, maybe, I don't know if there's even enough for a 1 ounce sample of this. I might sample this or the vodka to one of the patrons or something like that, just so they can try it, because it is very unique and very different. And that's what part of being in this whole gamut of things. If I get blessed with things, I'm going to pay it forward. So really interesting, really unique, and I'm glad that I did it. And I'm glad that I had a piece of it. And I can't thank David and Corbin Cash enough for coming on the show, hanging out with me, and it was a blast. It really was. Thank y'all very much. And for those who are listening and watching still this far into the end, thank you. You are the OGs. Love you. Y'all be good. Until next time, drink some Corbin Cash.